Hello, hello. Hey everyone, I am back again with another video for our Monday Muster series. I am Allie Harper. I'm the founder, chief family advocate, and executive director here at Global Hydranencephaly Foundation. And today is the start of World Communication Week, which means, yes, you guessed it, I'm going to be chatting about communication. Maybe you think that this sounds like kind of an odd topic for a nonprofit that serves a community of individuals who are nonverbal, but it's not odd at all. Nonverbal does not mean non-communicative, and every human being has the ability to communicate, and they should be given every tool and resource to communicate to their full potential. But first, the history of World Communication Week. Communication is natural to all human beings, regardless of their ability or their cognitive level. We start communicating as soon as we are born into this world, even though the first few years of communication aren't as coherent as the later ones for most. Random fun fact here, humans can convey their emotions with 21 different facial expressions. That right there is communication. We learn to express ourselves better with the help of languages and physical gestures we pick up as we grow older and interact with more people in our communities. So with the development of technology, the very nature of how we communicate has changed. Mobile phones, the internet, those kinds of things have revolutionized the way we communicate. The internet has become a major platform of communication in recent years for everybody of all ages. It has also brought about additions to our existing languages, which has expanded those to a great degree. Lots of internet abbreviations, emojis, all of those sorts of things have become a regular part of any conversation. So even with many, let me go back. So a lot of people might argue that this new form of communication and socialization has led to this huge decline in basic communication skills. And studies are suggesting that social media platforms are designed to be addictive and are often associated with things like anxiety, depression, physical ailments. But technology for those who are nonverbal is essential, and it doesn't stop with the internet. But let me backtrack a bit before I dive into that topic. So, human language is a remarkably complex form of communication. It consists of countless languages and tons of dialects, slang, all of that sort of thing. But even with a huge array of language differences, one thing persists. Nonverbal aspects of communication are stable and they're universally important to all, regardless of the language being spoken. The ways in which your body either emphasizes or contradicts spoken words is just as important as the words you use, or even more so in a lot of cases, in those moments when actions speak louder than words. This is known as nonverbal communication, nonverbal cues, or most often it's described as body language. So, what does body language mean exactly? Nonverbal communication is information that's passed without the use of spoken or written words. So that includes things like eye contact or the lack thereof, facial expressions, gestures, posture, even personal appearance, physical environment, the things that are in the environment, touch, vocalics, which is paralanguage, the use of time, and the distance that you put between yourself and the person who is receiving your information. So verbal and nonverbal communication occurs usually simultaneously. Nonverbal communication is usually less about cognitive control and more about revealing what we're actually thinking and feeling. So body language, facial expressions, and vocal characteristics, they're not easy to control. Whereas verbal communication, it's done intentionally, it's really easy to manipulate. So as a result, we have a lot more faith in trusting what nonverbal cues are being given versus what is actually said. So if a person says one thing but sends a contradicting message non-verbally, the receiver is much more likely to trust the non-verbal signal. So Having a conscious awareness of your nonverbal communication while you're verbally communicating is really going to help others receive messages the way you actually intended them to give. This is the problem with text message communication. You can't read what that person actually intends just by text talk. There is, of course, tons and tons of research regarding topics, effects, and expressions of unspoken communication and behavior, but I narrowed it down and I'm just going to share the basics that were written about by psychologists Paul Ekman and Wallace Friesen way back in 1969, but communication is basically the same. So they identified these 6 important ways how nonverbal communication can interact with our verbal discourse, things like repeating, conflicting, complementing, substituting, regulating, and accenting. So what are those things? And what do they mean? How do they describe our body language? All right, repeating, using specific gestures to strengthen a verbal message. Things like pointing to the object of discussion, right? So that or that person or that thing, all of those things, that's a form of repeating. Conflicting, when verbal and nonverbal messages within the same interaction send contradicting meaning. Conflicting messages often arise from feelings of confusion, maybe indecision, maybe somebody is frustrated. Like you're communicating with somebody and they say, oh, I had such a great time at Halloween last evening, but their voice sounds flat and they don't really show any emotion. They don't sound like they're very enthusiastic, like they had a great time. That's conflicting communication. Complementing communication. The accuracy of understanding information is greater when the nonverbal and verbal complement each other, right? So it's the opposite of conflicting. Messages have been shown to be correctly recalled to a greater degree when the body language matches the verbal exchange. So if you say that you're happy and you had a great time at the Halloween party last night, you have to show it with your body language at the same time. Substituting. So nonverbal behavior is used as the sole channel for communication. So just using a gesture, like shaking your head to say no, or shaking yes to say yes, or shrugging your shoulders when you're not really sure. Those are substituting. That's for substituting nonverbal cues for verbal discourse. Regulating, and we can use nonverbal signals to regulate speech, also called turn-taking signals. They're kind of body language type gestures to make it possible to alternate between speaking and listening. So touching somebody's arm can signal that you want to talk next, like pause for a minute, it's my turn, that kind of thing. So accenting, it's when we use nonverbal signals to emphasize our words. Good speakers know when to use strong gestures or when they should use deliberate pauses, changes in vocal volume, speech rate, that kind of thing. Someone who is extremely verbally expressive, they have a bigger impact in communicating their message. An example, if somebody is verbally expressing anger, they might speak very, very loudly, or I almost combined loudly and angrily at the same word, but you know what I'm saying. So that's the basics of how most humans communicate without vocalization. But what about communication in cases that a person is unable to hear, speak, or communicate through those means at all? So the following is some of this information I pulled from the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders. So let me pull up my notes here. I should have already had them pulled up, but oh, you know what? I can't even. My apologies. How unprofessional. I'm not communicating very well when I don't have. I had my notes pulled up and I think I closed them out. So give me 1 second. So this is definitely one of those times where the communication is failing because I wasn't prepared. But anyway, so we're talking about assistive devices. So and my notes are still loading, but assistive devices or assistive technology can refer to any device that helps a person with hearing loss. Perhaps they're not able to speak, maybe they have a language disorder, apraxia, that kind of thing. So these terms often refer to devices that help a person to hear and understand what is being said more clearly or to express thoughts more easily. With the development of digital and wireless technologies, more and more devices are becoming available to help people with hearing, voice, speech, and language disorders communicate more meaningfully and participate more fully in their daily lives. So that is what we're going to talk about here. And again, this information is from the National Institute of Health, the National Institute on Deafness, and other communication disorders. So what types of assistant devices are available? First, we'll start by, there's actually 3 primary names that are used to describe assistive devices. So there's assistive listening devices, ALDs. That's things like hearing aid or amplification devices. These are especially helpful for hearing when there's a lot of background noise, cochlear implant, that kind of thing. There are augmentative and alternative communication devices, and this is what I've worked with most often. These are what help people with communication disorders express themselves. These are the devices that children with hydranencephaly, adults with hydranencephaly could really, really benefit from and should all have the opportunity to learn how to utilize. These devices can range anywhere from low tech, no tech, to like a simple picture board or flashcards, to a computer program that synthesizes speech from text. There's a wide variety of devices that fall into this category. And then there are alerting devices, things that are connected to a doorbell, telephone, or an alarm, something that blinks lights so that people who maybe cannot hear are able to know that an event is taking place, that kind of thing. What types of assisted listening devices are available? There are tons and tons of listening devices, but we're going to skip all of that, and we're going to talk mostly about augmentative and alternative communication devices. That's AAC. And there's lots of ways to communicate, of course, with internet, but the simplest AAC device is a picture board. And you can make a picture board and you can make them no tech by just making essentially flashcards. But you can also, there are devices that are like just a picture board or a touch screen, and those use pictures or symbols of typical items and activities that make up a person's daily life. For an example, a person might touch the image of a glass to ask for a drink, that kind of thing. A lot of picture boards, of course, can be customized. They can be expanded based on a person's age, their education, occupation, interests, and of course, their cognitive levels. So for individuals that have hydranencephaly, purposeful movement sometimes makes it really difficult for them to use these devices, but there are a lot of other things that help with that too, such as eye gaze systems, switches, all of that sort of thing. Keyboards, touchscreens, and sometimes a person's limited speech can be used to communicate desired words. Some devices employ a text display. The display panel typically faces outward so that 2 people can exchange information while facing each other, and these are super fun to use, especially in a classroom setting. So your child would see one screen that has their options, and then the other side would show what your child is picking, right? So you can read what they're saying, but then you can also set up these devices to vocalize what the child is choosing on their screen as well. Spelling and word prediction software is often included in this so that it's not so choppy that you have to piece things together. Makes it faster and easier to get the information in a more clear and concise manner. There are also speech generating devices that can translate words or pictures into speech. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. So like some of the eye gaze systems I've worked with, children will look at what they are choosing, and then the device will speak out what the child or the teen or the adult are looking at. So um, a lot of those devices are really cool because you can choose from several different voices. You can choose male or female, child or adult, and even add regional accents so you can really personalize them. Um, yeah, so those are fun. But there are also communication devices like this that are available for communicating by telephone. A lot of people, I'm sure you heard, a lot of people with hearing loss through the years, you've heard of TTY or TDD machines to communicate by phone. That same technology benefits people with speech difficulties. It's a great technology. So basically, it's a TTY machine. It's essentially a typewriter, and it displays typed conversations into a readout panel like a screen, a computer screen, or it can be printed out on paper. So a caller would either type messages to each other over the system, or if the call recipient doesn't have a TTY machine, there's actually a relay service. If you just call 711, that will help them communicate. So that is pretty sweet. But those, now that there's so many other electronic communication devices, that is pretty old school, but it does still exist. And especially a lot of people in the geriatric community still use these machines. Most of the time you can place a regular phone call through the telecommunications relay service using any device with a keypad. So you can use a laptop, cell phone. Some people have like personal digital assistants, iPads, that kind of thing still. And then of course, texting just makes it so much easier because you can just skip that relay service altogether, right? Um, there are other systems that use voice recognition software, and it will relay American Sign Language to translate words into text or computer generated speech in real time. Pretty awesome. Um, so there's, of course, as with everything, a lot of research being conducted on assistive technology all the time, and there's new technology. I don't even know all of the technology that still exists, and I'm trying to just give a quick summary today just to touch on it. But of course, they're working on devices that are going to help improve the ability for people to hear with hearing loss. Things like cochlear implant. It sounds like a great tool, but it can be really difficult to communicate, to hear, and to kind of filter out the sounds and noises, especially for children. Um, they're improving devices for non-speaking people, more natural synthesized speech, so it's not so robotic, because it can be really difficult to communicate with a robot, right? Um, there's some super awesome technology, brain-computer interface research, and essentially scientists are studying how neural signals in a person's brain can be translated straight over by a computer to communication. So this is really being looked at for people with ALS or stroke who lose their ability to move their arms, legs, or body, um, or they're just not able to express words, even though they're able to think and reason normally, which, believe it or not, is the it is the case for a lot of individuals with hydranencephaly. As they get older, you see them expressing themselves in more grandeur means, and when you give them the opportunity to try a communication device, they're really sharing what those thoughts are that they have, is sharing their opinions, their likes, their dislikes, all of those things. So this device, they implant electrodes on the brain's motor cortex, and it helps to get that information out of the brain, essentially, right? So another thing about this kind of technology, they're trying to develop a prosthetic device that's going to be able to translate a person's thoughts into synthesized words and sentences, which would be super cool. And I've seen it in action as like how they want it to work, and it seems like it'd be amazing once it comes together. And then I know there was another research project that they're developing a wireless device that will monitor brain activity triggered by visual stimulation. So it's basically eye gaze technology, right? So if you stare at it, usually the eye gaze technology has the sensor right around the eye area, right in the center of the forehead. And if they stare at it, then it communicates what you're looking at, right? So there is tons and tons and tons of information on technology for communication, but the most important message here is that every human being should be given the opportunity to communicate in every way possible. A lot of parents who are around their loved ones with hydranencephaly and they're caring for them day in and day out are able to communicate with them in whatever way that the individual has shown their ability to communicate. But for the rest of the community, it's much more difficult. So um, check with your speech language pathologist. Make sure that when your children when your children are very, very young, they're receiving those services through your local early intervention program, and that will help immensely. But for now, that's it. I will be sharing more information all through the week as far as communication devices, everything from no tech to high tech and everything in between, of course. So with that, have a great week, and I will post another new video next week.